So the musical rendition that you just heard, Ave Maria, I know was proudly performed by Brigman Owens' college roommate at the University of Cincinnati, Mr. Chip Shelton, and if we could give him a hand. I am thrilled to be joining all of you here today as we come. I love how the Owens family appropriately entitled this A Celebration of Life, because everything that I have certainly heard about Brigman Owens, for so many of you who know him way better than me, it is exactly that for sure. And I know that Patty Owens had asked me to put some words together. I'm humbled that she invited me here in the capacity of a Christian minister. I know many of you know me from a different profession, if you will, and having the name James Brown has created all kinds of challenges for me. But I'm thrilled to be here as a Christian minister today, so there's no ambiguity about that in terms of which James Brown it is. And I know that Patty had asked me to put some words together, but quite frankly, I can't do that because after reading what her thoughts were, and she was asking me, Doc, if I would tweak and reposition some things, and there I wouldn't even begin to do that because who could express it better than his wife, Patty Owens. So Patty, I am going to read exactly what you have here because I think it speaks volumes. On behalf of the family, Patty, Robin, Tracy, and extended family, we want this gathering to share with all of us their stories and experiences with Brigman Owens, the man as each of you saw him. We are comforted by the fact that so many were able to see Brigman Owens, the man, as we saw him. We are comforted by the fact that so many were able to be here as well, to do exactly, and to see more importantly, and this is the part that really touched me to my core, Briggs' commitment to God's purpose in living and dedication, to getting things accomplished. He believed he was blessed and saved, and he wanted the same for others. God came here for us all. That's my parenthetical comment. Why are we here other than to be pleasing to the Lord who made us? Our lives are a testimony to the strength and trust we have in the Lord. Brigman trusted with his life always. He extended that trust to each of us by the way he handled relationships, both personally and in business. Brigman loved and enjoyed being together with his children and grandchildren. He wanted each to strive to be excellent in life. Yes, we miss him tremendously, but will feel his presence always. I want you to know that we are not alone because all Brigman's family and friends across the country and abroad are praying for us, talking with us, and gathering around to support us. We thank you for being extremely supportive with cards, flowers, and food. You have been and are now gifts from God. Brigman Owens is the most beautiful human inside and out that I have ever known. Who could have said that better? So with that in mind, Robin and Tracy did ask me just to give a snippet. I had the opportunity, indeed the blessing, to meet with the family about 2 or 3 weeks ago as we were at Robin's house to kind of share with their family, their husbands, their kids, grandkids, Owen as well, for sure. And one thing was palpably clear from that session. Here I go in as a minister thinking that maybe I would be providing some comfort, maybe having to console someone, but they all had nothing but exceptional things to say about Brig. They were all complimentary. I couldn't tell which daughter really was the favorite, although they both claimed individually to be the favorite, but that wasn't the case. And Patty just sat there with the biggest smile on her face, watching and listening to her family, her husband, her son-in-law. They were all just exceptional, talking about how Brig made time for everyone. Heavens, I can add to that, amend that, as when I was pulling into the parking lot, there were two men who were getting out of their car, one an ex-football player, I didn't get the name, and one who's known Brig a long time. And they were extremely emotional. As a matter of fact, Patty, Robin, and Tracy said that when men especially were told about Brig's passing, that they got emotional. They touched them and all of you to the core. So with respect to my responsibility as a minister, I did tell Patty that I would think about a scripture that I felt was most appropriate. And the one that came to mind for me is found in Proverbs chapter 10, verse 7. And it says, the memory of the blessed, the memory of the just is blessed, is present tense. It doesn't end. That impact that Brig had will be eternal. It will be influential and impactful. And certainly that's exactly what God had in mind. I'm not even going to deal with the contrast to that. I think that's self-explanatory because Brig was that kind of a role model and leader. And his daughter said he never tried to tell them what to do. He would walk through the process with them to allow them to arrive at the decision themselves, which was always a decision of excellence. With that in mind, let me close with the prayer as Patty had asked me. Father, we come to you in the precious name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Father, truly giving you all of the praise and the honor and the glory because truly you are worthy. It is not we who made ourselves, but you. We are your people, the sheep of your pasture. People may debate that today, but that is an eternal truth. And you say in your word in Psalm 116 and verse 15, precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his saints. God, we know that you in a special way take care of those who belong to you as they are escorted into the presence of you. And we know that is the case with Brig Owens. Yes, theologically, we understand that the body is sleeping in the grave, but the soul and spirit are eternal. So therefore, we have a serious decision to make in terms of which route we will go, because it will be an eternal decision. Brig made it clear in the way he lived his life, not trying to beat people over the head with the Bible. It has been said that it is attributed to St. Francis of Assisi, but whoever said it spoke the truth when they mentioned that, because it is emblematic of Brig, that many people would prefer to see a good sermon than to hear one. And that clearly is who Brig was. We praise you, we glorify you, and we thank you, Father. And it's in Jesus' precious name that we pray, who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, Father, forever and ever. Amen and amen. So the moderator today, the officiant, if you will be, is someone who is well known in the Washington area. Certainly we all enjoyed him on the field as a tight end with the hometown team, and it was significant in terms of the accomplishments of that group and those who preceded them, many of whom I've gotten a chance to meet over the past number of years from when they played, having been blessed by, and I'm told to call her Miss Gwen Mitchell, because she was someone who really was the focal point around who many rotated, if you will, when Bobby Mitchell was playing. A man of faith, just like Brig, and certainly with Mrs. Charlie Taylor as well, but Gwen was the one. And so Doc is in that same mode. Yes, we know him as a tight end, having played with the hometown team, and also a legend in broadcast circles for decades now. He will be the moderator and the officiant, Mr. Doc Walker.
Thank you. Of course, there was a bit of humor with James, and I thought we should share that because we have enough to be sad as a result of the circumstances, but honored and glad that we had the opportunity to be touched by Brigman Owens and his family. For me, I feel that I'm not worthy of the position, but yet he still honored me. I would make fun of Brig because of his age, much as you've heard Brian Mitchell destroy me because of mine. But I use Brian Keith Mitchell as an example because Brigman Owens established a standard. When you have someone from your hometown, now granted, I was a junior in high school when they played the Miami Dolphins 1972. You will think that this was orchestrated, but it's not. When you're a junior in high school and your mother has said this to you over and over and over, can't you just be like Brig? I remember being in daycare and she would drop me off. No, you don't know what it's like. Then to have her say, why can't you just be like Brig? So you grow up with that. There's no hate in my game. Nothing but admiration. But when you grow up like this, you can either be attracted to or away from that subject. They played the Super Bowl. I've got Brig, I've got all these guys, Roy Jefferson, George Allen, I've got all in my room. Because they're staying in Santa Ana, California to saddle back in. The game doesn't turn out the way we wanted it to, but the fact that they were there, and I also saw that championship game against the Dallas Cowboys. I watched it. Might have been black and white, Brian, don't even say it. I know what you're thinking. But at least we had a television. It wasn't a radio. And that victory was so big, I felt it. I got to meet Jerry Smith because of Brigman Owens. In a strike here, and they were talking about a hero, Mike Bragg. These guys to me were more, it was bigger than life. We didn't have video games. And if we had one, we wouldn't have been able to afford one in our household. We had Pong. And also, when you grow up the way I grew up, if you stayed in the house long, your parents had you do things that weren't fun. So it was all about this athletic chase, that game, Charlie Taylor, the catch, the throw from a Bruin, Billy Kilmer, and I'm going, wow. Then I arrived here by fate in 1980, and who do I run into? Who's there to greet me? Brigman Owens. So you know now, a lot of you have Siri. I had Siri back in 1980. I say, hey, Brig, where should I stay? Brig said, I want you to be in McLean, Virginia. I went to McLean, Virginia. Hey, Brig, I need a car. What should I do? He hooked me up with a car dealership. I had Siri back in 1980. Hey, Brig, where should we eat? Because he knew it all. I was blessed by this. He didn't like the story about me being in daycare. It would always get to him a little bit. But he always had my back. And for all that Brian Mitchell believes I abuse him with, I'm doing exactly for Brian what was done for me. Because I had GPS. I was in a place I'd never been, and yet I had a GPS system. All I had to do was call Brig. And not only was it that comforting to me, but for most people that came into his life. No man, no woman is perfect, but he's as close to it as some of my friends, some of my closest, I had to pray for him. But it's love. But Brig, and I know Patty, the guy was as close to perfection of a dude that I've ever seen. Okay, now I can't say that about all my friends. But the standard that he set, this rivalry in this town, to me, it was the over-the-hill gang. It was George Allen. It was the era to where they made it personal. Legacy is all about getting people to buy into something, to buy into an attitude, an understanding that we are one. And when we go after you, you're in trouble. That's what I gathered, and it was taught by Brigman Owens. That level of commitment to this community, that's why you are here. It's not all about his football. As a matter of fact, that's just one of the things. He was a 5'2" human being. Martin Mayhew, I'm so proud of Martin Mayhew, Mark Murphy, who is here today, because they went beyond the helmet. People say to me, well, why? You seem like you're always going. Because the guy that introduced me to this was always going. Nothing about golf, hunting, or fishing. Never saw Brig in that mode. The tournament he did, and when he played golf, it was to benefit others. It was charitable. His golf tournament, super leaders, these things were not for Brig Owens. They were for others. He was a giver. And if you were in his group, if you were part of his crew, you were a giver. Best example I could ever say, you can ask my wife, Carol, that when you saw Brig, you saw Patty. You saw Patty, you saw Brig. It was a collaborative effort, doing things to help this community. It wasn't a money grab. It wasn't a money grab. It was to make this area, it was infectious. They used to put banners down K Street in the early 80s. There was a collegiate environment that was here because of the burgundy and gold. A united front in a political town that doesn't hardly agree on anything. They agreed on one thing, and that was burgundy and gold. And that man in his representation, and on behalf of the commander's organization, Dan and Tanya Snyder, who've extended that respect and that honor to match and to be whatever it takes them to be to honor Brig Owens. And it's important that this man's life, we use that as a platform to make him proud. I really want to just be out in this seat with the rest of you, because I just wanted to soak all of this in, just reading about it. And I go, Brig would put you to work. And I see Owen, and I go, I'm so proud of this young man. Because, you know, when Brig got something on his mind and he was committed to something, that means you were committed to it too. You know, we had 3 boys. I've been to youth, probably been to all kind of practice. Brig call you up and say, hey, there's a little league, there's a pop warner, whatever it is. You ready? Yes, sir, Brig, I'll be there. And I told Owen, well, I love this kid so much because that responsibility is enormous. It's an enormous amount of responsibility to be placed on any human being. And for that human being to accept that in today's social media environment, with all the chaos, and to be what this young man is and is becoming and will be with this family, is special. And we all look at that and go, what a collective effort towards perfection. I want to honor Rock Newman, who could not be here due to illness, but his love, he almost had me crying on the phone talking to Rock. And I said we will honor him and give him that. I want to bring up a young man that I promised I would not make this comedic. It'll be the first time I've ever introduced him without it being humorous, because he is clearly one of my heroes. And when I saw that he was on this list I go, wow. Ladies and gentlemen, he's the voice of the University of Maryland. That's just one of his occupations. Due to limited in time, I'm not able to list the 47 other sponsors that he would have today. Would you put your hands together for Mr. Johnny Holliday?
Doc, I'll be nice. If I don't, you'll step on me. Doc Walker, I think, and I think you'll agree, is one of the best. Great to be with you. Like Doc said, it's an absolute honor and makes you feel very, very humble to be part of this celebration today, to honor someone who has left such an indelible mark on all of our lives. It's rare to have somebody come in your life that leaves you with not only memories that you will always treasure forever, but examples of how to live your life the right way, to leave a lasting impression on both young and old. Brig Owens was a prince of a guy. A prince is defined as somebody who's prominent in their field, and that was Brig. A great person, a man of high rank, high standing in his profession, and among others, and that was Brig. He meant more to you and I and anybody in this room than any words can properly describe. Brig was truly one of a kind, and thank goodness for that. I met Brig about 52 years ago in 1970. I had just come to Washington from San Francisco to join WWDC and to host the morning show between 6 o'clock and 10. Brig was playing for the Redskins, and I had started charity basketball teams in Cleveland, in New York, in San Francisco, and here when I came to Washington. And I asked Brig if he would join me on my team to play in the off-season against high school faculties and high school coaches. It would help us attract standing room only crowds, keep him in good shape. And there was only one problem. Each player only got $25 for gas money. I got the impression that didn't sit too well with Brig, and he quickly told me, and I could tell he was a little bit upset. It's for schools and charity, right? And kids. I said, yeah. You give that $25 to charity. That was the beginning. That was my first lesson in learning. I was dealing with a different professional athlete. It wasn't Brig Owens, the NFL all-pro defensive back. It was Brig Owens, who appreciated where he came from as a kid, and he never lost sight of where he's been and where he was going. And you know, Brig was a good basketball player, really, really good. He led our team in scoring and helped us raise over $100,000 for schools that we played and for charity. And many of you may not even know this, but back in the early 80s, after he retired from football, I needed a sidekick for Maryland football broadcast on radio. And I asked Brig to be that guy. He said, you know, Doc, I've never done it before. If you want to take a chance, and we did. I said, sure, we'll take a chance. And he quickly became one of the best analysts I've ever had in all my 43 years of doing Maryland athletics. He was insightful, yet respectful. These were college kids doing their very best in the football field. I don't think he was ever critical of a player, ever critical of a coach. And that was Brig Owens. And one of the great things about working alongside Brig was our road trips. We would talk what seemed to be like hours. I wanted to talk about his playing days. Who was the toughest guy he had to tackle? Who was the greatest coach he played for? All he wanted to do was talk about my high school days. And I said, Brig, I was a 5'8", 145-pound quarterback that led my high school team to a perfect 0-10 record in my first year. And he said, I know that. I said, in my second year, we got better. We were 4-6. He said, I know that. And in my senior year, we were state champions. And Briggs said, I know that. I was waiting for you to get to that point. You were state champions. And he said with a smile, wasn't that the year you sat out? That was Brig. That was an early indication of getting to know one of the most incredible athletes I've ever met. Brig had focus, Brig had vision, he had charisma. He would light up a room just by his presence and that smile. Nobody had a smile like Brig Owens. He could make everybody feel as if they were his best friend, and they probably were. The past 15 years, Brig was part of my celebrity golf tournament to help kids with their education, and because Brig was there, he helped us raise over $2 million for those kids, the same as he did for all these years with Super Leaders. We all know about his football story, but to me, what he did after football was even more important. Patricia and Robin and Tracy, your husband and dad set an example for all of us how to live our lives to the fullest. If only we had more Brig Owens in this world. He may have worn number 23, but to us in this room, he will always be number 1.
Those broadcast moments are so much fun, and I would tell Brig we'd go up and do a Maryland game, and I'd tell Brig, I said, Brig, I'm going to go in and tell Johnny that I'm not going to be able to do the interview. First of all, he never asked me to do an interview. I would go in, but he would always have guests. You know, John's pretty much a big thing, right? So I would go in and go, John, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to be able to do the interview today. I've got another obligation. And I would walk out, and he would start crying, laughing, and Brig. We got so much fun out of that. Oh, boy. Brig Owens, a man of so many different arenas. It's hard to be good at one thing, but showing off your talent is when whatever you get around, it glows. He was a team leader. He was involved in the politics of pro football. D. Murray Smith, who is the executive director of the NFLPA, I'm sure they've had some stories. He loved D, and he loved talking about the organization of players and being as smart as they could possibly be. Brother Smith, would you join us now at the podium? Give you a round of applause.
It is truly an honor to be here today. It's humbling to be here, literally, and it's hard for me to say goodbye to people. So I'm just going to try to keep it in the present tense. It's humbling to be in the presence of Brig. Brig Owens is still a friend of mine, and he will always be one of the best manifestations of what it truly means to be a member of our union, a member of the fraternity of players, and someone who dedicated his life to ensuring that the lives of our players are better tomorrow than it is today. That's Brig. I'm going to take a little bit of time, tell a few stories, perhaps tell a few lies. Nobody will know the difference, so that's why I'm going to do it. Brig dedicated his life to his family, the youth of this city, and for what I hope you will indulge me with just for a few minutes, the union of NFL players. All of us, everyone who has ever taken a moment to dedicate their lives to this union is in deep gratitude to Brig and people like him. You see, I never knew Gene Upshaw. Gene passed away before I took the job. And coming into this job and sitting in that chair, for anyone who's been in my office, you'll know that right behind my chair is the only helmet that Gene Upshaw wore for the years he played football. It's got duct tape on it. It's spray painted with the silver and black. But I had a choice. Because I couldn't talk to Gene, I could talk to Brig. And so Brig, in no small way, came back to our union, but so did someone that Brig truly loved, and a person that we, or at least almost everybody in the room, truly loves, Ed Garvey. You have to laugh because anyone who knew Ed Garvey, you just literally have to laugh. Ed was acerbic. Ed was sometimes a little brash. Ed was at times extremely confrontational, and that's why I loved Ed. I could channel Ed when I needed to be confrontational. I could channel Ed when I needed to be a little bit angry. But the reality is Ed Garvey, and I want to talk a little bit about Ed because you can't really talk about Brig in the union without talking about Ed. Ed's humor, his wit, his love for the players, his intellect, his strength was literally the knife's edge of our union. But the cornerstone of Ed was Brig. Because while Ed could go toe-to-toe with any owner, and while he relished the opportunity to literally do his best to drive them absolutely insane, it was Brig that Ed leaned on as the cornerstone because our union is never any stronger than the players in the locker room. And in the same way that Ed's wit, and I have to tell one story about Ed, when we signed the 2011 collective bargaining agreement at the NFLPA offices in Georgetown, the owners came, Roger came, they came upstairs and they walked around and they looked around the building. They looked at Ed. I'm sure they said something under their breath. It's still funny. Ed turned to one of them and the owner said, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know that the NFL Players Association owned their own building. And it's a really nice building." And without missing a beat, Ed said, "It should be nice. We bought it with all of the money we got from you after we sued you." Hello. When Brig served as a player rep in 1974, strike year, the players voted to strike the league year, which began with players not showing up at training camp. The stakes were high. Free agency was the primary goal, but so was something that Ed championed called a percentage of the gross. We know how that story ended. In 1974, some teams remained strong. This hometown team remained strong. They were the last team to hold out. That's a legacy of Brig's leadership. It was Brig who took this local team and ensured that its stars, Billy Kilmer, Mike Bragg, Roy Jefferson, all of the players that I loved growing up, they were on the front lines of being union leaders. That was Brig's legacy. And when I met Brig, and Brig made it clear to me what this job meant, Brig told me one thing that I've never forgotten. The union doesn't have to win every fight, but the union has to have the will to fight. And Brig loved this union. Brig loves this union as much as he owned and loved his family. And for that, I will be ever indebted. Brig transferred from being a player rep to assistant executive director, and now with a law degree in hand that he earned while playing, he became a leader in our office of the union. And soon after that, Ed tapped him to be a part of the bargaining unit for the 1982 negotiation. Like so many things with the National Football League, this is not a linear job. Negotiations went south, another strike loomed, and perhaps one of the most interesting times in our union history, the players and Ed and the leadership decided to put on a game. Why? Not to make money. They didn't put on the game to replace the National Football League because they knew they never would. During the strike, the leaders of the union, and Brig in particular, put on games because they wanted everybody to understand that the game was about the players, not the owners. So they cut a deal with Ted Turner, at the time a small media mogul who created something called CNN. Just a tiny little business right now. They cut a deal with Ted Turner to put on the unofficial season. That team consisted of all-stars from the striking players. One story remains incredibly famous. John Riggins, again, another person from this home team, not only played in the first game at RFK Stadium, but then flew to Los Angeles to play in the second game on the same day. Leadership, legacy, dedication, sacrifice. And no, those games didn't continue because the owners figured out a way to get an injunction to stop the games. But two things came out of that. First, one I've already mentioned, that it became a demonstration of the legacy of leadership. Second, and my favorite part of this story, and I have to thank our former general counsel, Richard Berthelsen, for this part of the story. Even after those games ended, two things remained 100% clear. The union was willing to fight. And second, many of you don't know who became the commissioner of the unofficial season. It was Brig Owens. So to this day, the only African-American commissioner of the NFL is Brig Owens. And I dig that. When Brig came back to join the bargaining team, many of you know this story. The games, the entire season had lasted an entirety of 2 games. When Brig walked into the negotiation session, like all of you, everybody stood up and gave him applause. And it was Ed Garvey who said, hey, Mr. Commissioner, next time, plan for a longer season. Hello. In 2008, I was recruited for this job. At the time, I was working on the transition team for what would be President Obama and the Department of Justice. I was conflicted about whether I should come back to the Department of Justice, a job, really the only job that I ever wanted was to be the U.S. Attorney in this District of Columbia. When I got recruited for this job, I was conflicted. One night, after I came back from the transition office, I was sitting in my office at Patton Boggs. Phone rang, my secretary assistant, long gone, around 7 o'clock. Picked up the phone, and person said, hello, is this D. Smith? I said, yeah. This is Brig Owens. Now, for all of us who know Brig now, who grew up knowing Brig, let me put this in perspective. Much like Doc jokes around about age, I was 8 years old when they played that Super Bowl against the undefeated Miami Dolphins. So when I picked up the phone and the person on the other end said it was Brig Owens, yeah, this is D. Smith. I mean, this is the Brig Owens that I watched from Section 226 at RFK. This is Brig Owens that I chose number 23 to wear when I was in Pop Warner because of Brig Owens. And when he said that I need to talk to you, the only thing I could mutter was, yes, sir. So we left my office. He said, can you meet me at the Daily Grill in Georgetown? Man, that was Brig's spot. Just loved that place. I met him that night, and a person who was conflicted about this job became dedicated to the mission of getting this job. Brig told me the stories of what it meant to try to organize a group of players into a strike. Brig told me about the conversations that he had with Len Haas, Mike Bass, Billy Kilmer, Pat Fisher, Charlie Taylor, all of the people that I grew up watching and I loved on the field. This man sat in front of me and told me the stories about what it meant to stand up for a group of men who were going to go to war to fight for a better life for themselves. And I walked away from that meeting with the Daily Grill, and now for the last 14 years, committed to a job that I can only say I wanted to do it like Brig. The mission of this union is really hard. This job is really hard. Brig talked me off a lot of ledges over the last 14 years. I should also blame him for making me agree to do this job. So I guess what comes around, thanks Brig. But let me end on this. Brig was a visionary because he saw all of it. All of it. He saw the good, he saw the bad, but he also knew that the good vastly outweighed the bad. Brig was a philosopher because he understood this job and the mission of this union and what we ask of every man who is a member of this union. And as a result, he became and always remained thoughtful and mindful. Brig was a prince because he carried the weight of it all with grace and humility. And Brig was a friend because he shared it with me and all of you, and he made us all better. So, I hope that later on this year you will all join me at the NFLPA offices on the executive floor when we dedicate the Brig Owens Leadership Corridor. There Ed will join, Brig will join Ed, Gene Upshaw, Richard Berthelsen, John Mackey, Kevin Mawai, Freeman McNeil, Reggie White, Eric Winston, all of these people who sacrificed so much so that we can bring the fight. So on this day, to my friend Brig, I can only say thank you for your love. Thank you for your love of the union. Thank you for your patience with a smart aleck lawyer from DC. Thank you for all of his friends, all of his family, Richard Berthelsen and those who I've talked to over the last few weeks, Stan White, who couldn't be here, Alan Page, who couldn't be here. Thank you for sharing the memories and the stories. Patty, to you and your entire family. Thank you for sharing so much of Brig with us. And from somebody who's been in this job for a long time, thank you for doing what I know you did. Shored him up when he came home, armed him for battle when he left. Thank you for that. And Brig, thank you for all of the calls. Thank you for that long dinner at the Daily Grill. Thank you for talking me off of so many ledges. And thank you for still being our leader. Thank you.
Wow. Murph, you remember that All-Star, that game that he referenced? We flew to the Coliseum. It's really one of the most remarkable things that happened. Both times it's just been a strike, but things that have happened here in Washington. How Joe Gibbs and our group, how we handled it better than everyone else because of the leadership of guys like Joe T, Murph. We had full practices without coaches. That's when I met Jerry Smith. He was the head coach of the team that we were battling with, and we flew out. I think we got $50. I don't even remember what it was, but to be able to go out to the Coliseum and go through that period of time of sacrifice, it was, it's something that I think a lot of us that played here want to be able to pass down to the young fellas that are here now, the commanders, in a way that they can understand what was before them. Because believe me, Brig was involved in every one of these maneuvers. If it happened, he was behind it, and he didn't have to be in front of it. But you'll hear throughout the next hour or so, he was involved in it and had a big influence on all of us. Even though we didn't understand it, it was so comforting to have someone to simply go, hey, Brig, what should I do with this situation? And get a response. And you'll hear more and more of it. When it comes to business, the thing that you can never say Brig is one-dimensional, he's multidimensional. He had such versatility. And we do have to shed that stereotype of the, quote, dumb jock. I don't know what era they were on. They doggone sure weren't in Washington. Because our people are versatile, they're ambidextrous, they can do it all. And still win, because that's got to be at the end of it. The thing about that you'll hear, the theme that'll go throughout today, is that Brig was a winner. And he played to win. Our whole era didn't have much choice. It wasn't that kind of money. It was to win. And that's what we have to make sure that we translate and that we infect our current crew so they get it. I didn't mention the ring I saw. You know, you hear people chasing the ring? That 72 ring that they designed, now they're so bad. You got to have a security guard with you if you have one of these new Super Bowl rings. I don't know how you go anywhere without a guard. But when I saw that ring that they designed, that 72 ring, I was hooked. And I said, I have to have one. And that's Brigman Owens. That's the echo. We say, hey, go finish the job. We got into it, go finish it. We go to business now, and John Heiser, we want to bring John up, Senior Vice President, Managing Director of the firm, the Bennett Group. And I know he's got some interesting stories about another side of the safety. John?
I thought a couple things might change, would be in my past, but I can see they're going to be part of my future. Number one, he's still looking over my shoulder. And number two, forever young. We all get older. Brig seems to get younger, and it just happens. So I am honored today to the Owens family for giving me this opportunity to share some thoughts about Brig. In life, sometimes you're lucky. You meet someone who has a profound impact on your life. Brigman Owens was that type of person to me. Working with him for 36 years, I witnessed firsthand how he lived, handled the challenges he faced in his life. His name, Brig, personified him. Strong, solid, both mentally and physically. For a man who played such a physical game for a living, he was a gentle soul off the field. Quiet, steady, confident, a great listener. He carried himself differently than most people. To lead by example is easier said than done, but that's literally how Brig conducted himself. He never lowered the bar. He always raised it. Anybody that needed a hand, Brig would step in to help. Never did he judge why someone needed assistance. They just did. He did the right thing, not once in a while, or sometimes, but all the time. And he had no interest in drawing attention to himself for doing so. His love for his family was first and foremost in everything he did. In Briggs' case, his family initially included his mom and dad, 12 siblings, nieces, nephews, cousins, and a multitude of friends along the way. Then came Patty from Cincinnati, the daughter of Big Jimmy. She was the love of his life. Their romance spanned 60 years. Of course, there are his daughters, the bookends, Robin and Tracy, who made him so proud. He frequently shared their many accomplishments and those of their loving husbands, Reno and Kevin. On equal footing are Raina, Owen, and Zazie, his beloved grandchildren. Everything he did was geared toward the benefit of his loved ones, and eventually, if he liked you enough, he would come to you, refer to you as family. He or she is okay, they're family. Was a typical way for him to refer to a close friend. Brig knew everybody, and everybody knew him. He was not a name dropper. He could pick up the phone any time of the day and get right through to where he wanted to be, often just to check in to say, hey, how you doing? His network was vast throughout the business, sports, nonprofit, educational, and political worlds. Briggs' reputation and credibility were powerful tools that he used wisely throughout his life. I believe that Edward Bennett Williams, the former owner of the Washington football team, saw those same characteristics during his playing days when he suggested to Brig that he attend law school, which he did and graduated. This Renaissance man used both his brain and his body to push the limit in living to the fullest every day of his life. Think about this. Late in life, not only could he touch his toes, he could also, in my office, place his hands flat on the carpet without bending his knees. Most people, as they get older, struggle to put on their socks. Not him. Brig kept his body well tuned, and always said a person has to keep his mind busy too. He continued to come into the office, always nattily attired, to work regularly until just shortly before he passed. He was determined to stay sharp and be self-sufficient. His unique hearty laugh still reverberates throughout our office and is greatly missed. Sometimes when we were just talking, the conversation would morph into sports. And a couple stories I'd like to share with you that Brig shared with me. His former Dallas Cowboy roommate, Bob Hayes, 64 gold medal, 100-meter champion, known as the fastest man on earth, was coming into RFK to play the Redskins with an average yards per reception of 24 yards. Brig, a defensive captain, called the chiller, which brought him directly across from Bob on the line of scrimmage for the Dallas's opening snap. As soon as the ball was snapped, Brig hit Bob in the Adam's apple with his forearm. Bob dropped to his knees, coughing. Looked up at Briggs and said, "What the hell you doing, Rumo?" Briggs' response was, "Your fast ass is not running all over RFK today, Bob." Bob had one catch that day. His 3 defensive touchdowns, defensive, not offensive, in one game against the New York Giants in Old Yankee Stadium was a special day in his illustrious career. Brig told me before the game, I walked amongst those monuments. And that stadium made that place special. You could just feel it. It would appear Brig felt it that day. His 36 career interceptions, gaining 686 return yards, remains a team record. One time, when we were talking about Jerry Smith's great stats and how unbelievable he was not a first ballot Hall of Famer, I asked him what type of guy was Jerry, and he quietly answered me. He was my friend. That moment showed the essence of Brig to me. The pureness of his friendship, the depth of his loyalty, that nice, quiet gentleman, a man of dignity, class, was a warrior in his heart. On the walls of his office were 2 framed testimonials from his former coaches and mentors, Vince Lombardi's creed and George Allen's consistency. There is no doubt that Brig, in whatever he did, he played to win. I'm very proud to borrow his words today and say he was my friend. I trust all of us here hold a special place in our hearts for the former captain. Together, let's remember and cherish the times we shared with him. Kindly keep Brig in your thoughts and prayers. Until we meet again, my friend.
Bullet Bob Hayes. This John, a great story Brig shared with me that Bob was his roommate. Brig was a quarterback at Cincinnati, then he went to the secondary. And the beauty about this, you hear gentleman, scholar, politeness. Brig would knock your head off. He was a savage. And people that hit well, look at all these. Wait, I'm worried about you. You're supposed to be the president of an organization. Now, don't get excited when I start talking about violence. You lit up like a Christmas tree. You can always tell these people they're sick. And Brig was sick when it came to that. You want to hear Brig Owens talk about a story when he inflicts pain upon an opponent. And that Dallas conversation, that stop of Walt Garrison on the 1-yard line, things of that nature, the parallels between these teams and how this thing evolves, you can't make this up. They get a stop. I think about that stop with Darryl Green and Monty Coleman against the Minnesota Vikings. There are plays that you think of, and Brig would break everything down. Everything was analytical to him. But the violent part, he told me about the time he was going to quit the Cowboys at training camp. And he was out of there. And he'd been run over. And Bob talked him in the stand. And I pity the fool that he went after because, you know, Brig was vicious. And that mild-mannered Clark Kent thing, I'm telling you, the dude was a savage. He really was. And the people that worked with him, Frankie Crosby, the executive director of Super Leaders, another thing we learned, you learn super leaders. We weren't just hooping because you wanted to hoop. You were hooping to get goods and services, pens and pencils and paper into the DC Unified School District. What he did, his purpose was to give, and he'd compete with you. And when I met Frankie, wow, I see why. I mean, she was the chief of demand, drug dimension reduction. She was the head of that worldwide. She's an animal. You can always tell somebody, "Mild man, here's Brig." You had to do business with her. And I'm telling you, she's a tiger. And I know why. People surround themselves around people that enhance them, not tear them down. Frankie, please come up to the microphone and share your story about Brig Owens. Frankie Crawford.
Hello. My comments are a little different from what you've already heard, but I'd be remiss if I didn't tell the family that you've done a yeoman's job. You've worked so hard. I've had the pleasure of witnessing it, and man, Rick would be so proud, and I just have to tell you that. Wow, bright lights. I first saw Brig on TV coming down the steps with Mrs. Reagan. And he was basically beside her. And I said to myself, is that her Secret Service? Is that her secret agent? The Secret Service agents usually are behind or in front. I thought nothing else of it. Shortly, about 2 months later, I went to a CIA briefing, and I kind of looked, I wanted to see who else was there who looked like me. And I said to the agent who was beside me, I said, that looks like that guy. And I said, is he a Secret Service agent? Who is he? He said, I don't know, Chief. He said, let's run him through the system when we get back. So I knew right then that he was somebody. But I'm going to tell you something. I never knew how he would affect my career. About 3 months later, I was called to the office by the attorney, at that time it was by the head of DEA. And I said, well, I have a meeting, but I'll go. I can't help, I don't want to be fired. But I had other things to do, I thought. And I got in his office, and you can't imagine who was in his office. Brigman Owens. By that time, I knew his name was Brigman, because we had checked him out in the system. I knew who his wife was. I knew he had the 2 girls. I just knew, hey, that's what you do. So he was there, and the administrator said, have a seat, Frankie. And he was talking about his program, Super Leaders. And I thought, we don't fund those kinds of programs. Why am I in here? Anyway, about 2 days later, my agent came to me and he said, Chief, you know what? We're going to Catoctin Mountains tomorrow. I said, Catoctin Mountains for what? He said, to look at this program called Super Leaders. He said, and you had a meeting with Dave Winfield, and so maybe you can ask him to go with you. So when Dave came to his meeting, I said, we're not meeting with you today. We're going up to the Catoctin Mountains. They said, you don't talk to Dave like that. I said, Dave doesn't know me. So we went up there, and I was really pleased with everything I had seen. And I came back home, and I wrote up a glowing report. Then, maybe 2 days later, something was in my box that didn't look like it was from DEA. And it was a bill. It was a bill to pay for the retreat up at Catoctin. I said, what in the world? How am I going to pay this bill? And if Joe Bann is in the audience, he taught me a lot. I wondered if he was, anyway, I don't know whether he told me to do this or somebody else told me. I learned very early in my career that you need to know very important people, and you need to know people in certain jobs very well. So I called a guy in New York, at our New York office, and I said, I can't pay this bill. It's not on my line item. And he said to me, oh, Frankie, send it up here. I'll take care of it for you. Great. The inspectors were in his office reviewing all of the money, drug money, money for cases and all. And he said, well, what's this line item? Who is it? What did you do with this money? I think it was like $3,900 something. He said, oh, Frankie from headquarters told me to pay it. So then I got inspected about 2 weeks later. And both of us got put on the street for a week without pay. So I said, this guy is something else. I said, so maybe, anyway, we paid. I loved being on the street because I was given an award maybe 2 weeks later So it didn't matter to me. But probably the thing I remember most about Brig is he called me and said, Frankie, I want you to meet a guy named Gene Upshaw. And so I told my special agent, I said, Gene Upshaw, Gene Upshaw, Gene Upshaw. So he came back, he said, you know, Brig was as clean as the white sheets on your bed. He said, and Gene is clean, but he said, I don't know why he wants you to meet him. I said, well, I won't meet him then. So Brig called back. He said, what time? And I said, I said I'd let you know. He said, I'm downstairs. I said, boy, this is some kind of guy. So I said, well, should I take the agent with me? He said, no. Oh, you didn't tell me that I can't take my agent with me. But I didn't take him. So we went to lunch, and I met this tall guy, Gene Upshaw. And Briggs said, Frankie, we want you to do us a favor. I said, yes. He said, I want you to go to the Attorney General and ask, you know, Frankie, you got married in the United States Capitol, so you got a lot of clout. And I said, he's going to lay something on me. And he said, I want you to go to the Attorney General and tell him that I want your special agents to sweep my office. Oh, my goodness. I thought, sure, how can he ask me to do something like this? Well, it so happened that I had spoken with his wife, the Attorney General's wife, the night before about a luncheon. And I told her I needed to speak with the general. Well, the next morning, I had a note on my desk to say, come to see the Attorney General. So there we go. So I said to the Attorney General, I met with two people. Brigman Owens, a fine gentleman he is, a fine gentleman. I knew he thought he was fine because he beat him in tennis. He beat the head of the FBI in tennis, and he also beat the head of DEA in tennis, so I guess he did know them. Anyway, I said, this guy was with him, and he was very bold, and he tried to back Brig up in terms of this request that I'm going to ask you. I took a lot of time to ask him because I thought he would just throw me out of his office. And I said, they want me to have agents sweep the office. I guess everybody here knows what sweeping an office means. Not with a broom, for sure. So he said, Frankie, he said, you know, you have a wonderful reputation. He said, you know the rules and regulations of the Justice Department, and you wouldn't do anything to spoil the good image of the Justice Department. We see how good it is by January 6th, don't we? So he said, so he said, and you wouldn't do anything wrong. He said, I've heard so many, you're such a person, you're a person of integrity. And then he said, but sometimes things happen. So he said, by the way, how is your daughter? How's Vicky? How's your family? I said, they're fine. He said, well, I have another meeting. And I knew to get up and walk out. And when I went back to the agents to tell them what they were to do, or what I thought I wanted them to do, they said, no, chief, you've lost your mind. One agent was really, he said, we protect you, but we can't protect you on this. I said, well, he said, what did the Attorney General say? I said, he said to me to go to the bathroom and brush my teeth. They knew what that meant. He didn't say yes and he didn't say no. Well, the next day, Brig called. I thought, oh, tell him I'm busy. Tell him I'll call him back. Tell him I'm in a meeting. Tell him I'm on the phone. He said he'll wait. Well, I'll tell you this. The agents went to Mr. Smith's organization, your organization, Mr. Smith. And I won't say what they found, but it was during the time of bargaining, and we got out of that. I didn't lose my job, and they didn't lose their job. You know, we talk about Brig being forceful. Pat is not that quiet either. Somehow, Brig had gotten the Attorney General to give him permission. Oh, he didn't ask for permission anyway. He wanted to go on a trip to the island. And I thought, I had a message. You're to do this and do that. Then someone gave me 3 tickets. A ticket for Patty, a ticket for Brig, and a ticket for me. I said, where are these people? What's going on? So anyway, we went to the island. Brig was making a speech. Of course, I had to go back and tell the Attorney General what happened, or tell the head of DEA, whomever conjured up this trip. So I said to Patty, it's time for us to get our clothes on to go to hear Brig speak. You know what she told me? Haven't you heard him speak before? I said, yes. She said, you know, the other night there was a man talking about making shoes over here. I said, yeah, I heard that conversation. She said, let's go see that man. When I got back to the department, I don't know what I wrote up. I just probably said Brig was very effective and everything. So anyway, after I retired, Brig said, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm going down on the Kent Island. I'm buying a boat and jet ski, and I'm having a good time. He said, oh. So he came down, and some of the other advisors, and he said, how long are you going to stay retired? I said, indefinitely. Well, there he is again. He said, why don't you come up the road 50 miles in and 50 miles back? That's how long it took, how many miles it took to come down and be the executive director of Super Leaders. I said, oh, I'm retired. So a couple of days later, he said, we're having a board meeting, and I just want you to sit on the side. Well, I was there as long as I was at DEA. And it was a long ride. But I'll tell you, the board members were some of the very best. But there's one guy, and you'll hear him today, Mr. Bischoff. Whenever I needed to do something of that was enormous, I would always go to him. But he was like the Attorney General, because you know what he did to me? He called me one day and said, Frankie, next week is Obama's birthday. I thought, so? He said, I want you to get Super Leaders together and go and tell him happy birthday. Go out, come on, get a group together. March in front of the White House, and you'll be the only ones. Well, it was was a slow news day. And I thought to myself, how will I do this in 3 or 4 days? Well, we got a band together from Eastern High School. That was a marching band. We gathered up the kids, went in front of the from the White House, played music. All the reporters came out. As I said, it was a slow news day. And guess what? Obama came and waved. Brig and I were standing there hugging. And one of the advisors, LaVon Turner, and it was all over the country and overseas. The next day I couldn't believe that all of the press had picked it up. And I thought, that one didn't backfire. But I'm very grateful to him for so much, and everyone else who's done so much for Super Leaders. He was our vice chairman, and he too has a big heart. But I didn't do anything by myself, and I never do. When I was at DEA, I always had special agents to take care of me and to have my back. And the same thing holds with Super Leaders. So on that note, I would like for all of the Super Leaders staff, and I saw some of you here, to please stand. Anybody involved with Super Leaders, the board, everybody. And I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for all you did to make Super Leaders such a wonderful organization. I know Sally Swartz is here, and she was there before I was, and she too did a magnificent job, and I want to thank her. So, having said that, the reason I have an escort is because I had a fall, and my leg hasn't healed, so I have a personal escort to take me back to my seat.
Super Leaders, we thank you. That was a lot of fun. A lot of tournaments, a lot of t-shirts, a lot of just having a lot of interaction with young people. And that is a theme that will carry on throughout today, the contributions. And hopefully, Patty, I'll get a chance to at least mention the fact of our skincare days when we were selling. Because Brig got a big kick out of that. That was like a relief. He was like, go. You guys do whatever y'all do. And that was a lot of fun. The next gentleman I bring up, I take great pleasure in this because knowing Bruce, the way I know Bruce, I know who's good with Bruce and who Bruce wouldn't flip a quarter for. He loved this guy. And Brigman Owens, I would give anything to go into a meeting with George and Brig just doing game plan. I'd love to just talk. When they talk about defense, it was unlike anything I've ever heard before because they broke defense down kind of like Joe did with offense. There were variables and everything was, we did movement. So what they did, they counter movement. And it was if you're a geek, it is the most interesting thing I can think of is when you hear defensive guys talking strategy and attack and counterattack. And nothing lit Brig up more than game planning or talking about an opponent and how that we and they could beat them. So I bring this next gentleman up who his father and player relationship between a head coach and a player is unlike I'd ever heard. And I know this man will have a lot for us. Bring up the former general manager of the Burgundy and Gold, Mr. Bruce Allen.
Well, good morning. Welcome to the Brig Owens Fraternity Fan Club. Patty, Robin, Tracy, thank you for including us in this event to celebrate the life. I've loved the stories I've heard, and there's so many more that people could tell us for years to come. But thanks to that man right there, who's living in all of our hearts and all of our minds, we can feel it every day. So thank you for that. You know, the Allen family has a relationship with Brig for over 50 years. And in those 50 years, we could count on him. He was always dependable, whether it was a clutch interception or his leadership, or D, once again, with the Players Association, because my father loved that Len Haas and Brig Owens kept the team together because we're one team. And on that ring, when we went to the Super Bowl, Doc, that you like so much, it says togetherness. And it starts back in those years of everybody fighting together. But I also could count on Brig when I was with the Redskins. He was my partner. We were trying to bring the Redskins back to the RFK campus. And as Brig called that beautiful place, he says, you know, it's a live, work, and play spot. And I said, what do you mean, Brig? Well, in Brig's days, with his roommate Jerry Smith, they would check into the armory on Saturday, do their National Guard duty, walk across the street, play a game for the team, and then walk back in and do their National Guard work on Sunday night after the game. So that was his idea of work, play, and live. I don't think the players today will like that as much as Brig did. You know, when I think of Brig, you have to thank some people, and there's a unique person I'm going to thank today. Because if it wasn't for Brig, or for what he did with Brig, we wouldn't be here. Now, obviously, the family would be here. Lucille, my date back there, might be here. But thanks to a coach named Tom Landry, he traded him to the Redskins along with Mitch Johnson over there. And that's how Brig came into our life and into this community. So for the first time in my life, I'm going to thank Tom Landry of the Cowboys. In sports, and especially football, and I'm hearing it from the people who have worked with Brig, we love lists. We like to make lists, what we're going to do. And I know you still do it, Murph, but we like lists. And my dad used to have on his chalkboard to accomplish list. Well, if we could peek into Brig Owens's accomplished list, I would imagine number one, it would say be a good husband. Two would be a good dad. Three, good grandpa. Four, it'd say athlete, probably would in parentheses stud next to it. It'd say be a gentleman and a good citizen. I think we all agree. He checked every one of those boxes, and in fact, he aced that test. And we thank Brig for everything he's done with that. You know, we talked about being lucky. We talked about the camaraderie that we all have. And no different than what Frankie just did, I would love for everyone who played with Brig Owens to stand up and salute Brig's teammates that love him so much. We love you guys. Brig loved you. Brig's phone bill must be $1 gazillion every month. Keeping in touch with all of you. He would let me know wherever I am who wasn't doing well, and let's call and cheer him up. So, love you guys, and Brig obviously appreciated all of you. In closing, you know, I heard on the radio coming in here, there's a lottery. And the lottery is a 800 or some million. Well, we're all winners. We're in his lottery. We're not. We're going to take the lessons he taught us. We're going to do the right thing. We're never going to forget that handsome, loving smile. And we're going to live our life the way he would like us to. Thank you once again for having us. Love you, Brig.
Sports and business, giving. It's a great theme. And yeah, you do. You have to look over your shoulder and say, yes. Robin called me. She'd go, can you do? Yep. No problem. Because I'm afraid to say no, because the one guy that you don't want to disappoint is Brig Owens, because he never let you down. And everybody makes mistakes. It's normal. I was shocked just to think that he's no longer with us. I didn't buy into it as if he was bionic. There was just something about it that took me to not go, you know what? Job well done. Now he's passed that baton. Now don't dare disappoint him. This next gentleman that we'll bring up, friend and family who understand and understood what Brig was all about from a different perspective. Jack Evans, please join the microphone.
Good afternoon, everyone. And it's certainly an honor and a privilege for me to be here today to celebrate the life of Brig Owens. And Patty, Robin, and Tracy, and all of the family of Brig, our thoughts and prayers are with you for this very, very difficult time. And always, please call on us if there's anything we can do to make it easier for you. But a very difficult time it is. You know, when you pass away, on your tombstone there's three things: the date you were born, a little dash, and then the date when you passed away. The first and last you have very little control over, but it's that little dash in the middle that defines what your life was. So the real issue is, who was Brig Owens? Well, first and foremost, Brig was a family man, without a doubt. In all the times I was with Brig, no matter where we were, he always started out by telling me about his family, his two daughters, and how great they were doing, and his wife, and many times, mostly his grandchildren. He loved to be called Pop-Pop or Poppy, and he would go on with the stories about the kids and how great they were doing. And that was really the essence of Brig. He really, really was a family man. And who else was Brig Owens? Well, there's an old saying, when you're this far down in the program, it's all been said, but not by me. Brig was a professional. We've heard the stories about, after his football career, he went into business and became a lawyer, worked with the union. But I first met Brig Owens when I was on the city council right in the beginning, back in 1991. My friend Luann Bennett, she and Brig were partners in business together, and they wanted to come down and talk to me about a business that was going on in my ward, in Ward 2. And I said, who are you bringing with you? Did you say Brig Owens? Now, I grew up in Pennsylvania. I was an Eagles fan when I was growing up, back in the 60s and 70s, so I knew who Brig Owens was. He used to whoop us all the time. But Brig Owens coming to my office? You've got to be kidding me. So I told my staff, I said, Brig Owens coming to the office tomorrow around 10 o'clock. So the next day around 9:30, 9:45, people started kind of dropping by my office. people this is in the Wilson building, our city hall, they started coming in the hallways. And for the only time I think in my career, I was the most popular politician in the District of Columbia. Because when Brig Owens showed up, everybody was there. Everybody knew Brig, and you know, such a testament to Brig. He shook every hand and signed every autograph. And all I remember about that meeting was sitting there, I can't remember what they were talking about. I just wanted to make sure I got Brig's autograph before he left. That was Brig Owens, the professional. But who else was Brig Owens? Well, he was also a person who gave back to his community. And we've heard the stories already, and we'll hear more, about how Brig was dedicated to the youth. And he would tell me stories about that, the groups he mentored, the students he mentored. He also was very active in helping current players, young men who would come into fortunes and not be ready to deal with it. And he had a group that helped the young players to deal with the notoriety and the fame that they all of a sudden had. He gave back all the time. And I remember the second time I met Brig Owens, again, I was brand new on the councils back in 1991, and this fellow, Lawrence Thomas, great friend of Brig Owens, and he was a deacon at Bible Way, one of the largest black churches in the region. It happened to be in my ward. It's Thanksgiving time, and Lawrence said, you got to come down. We give away Thanksgiving dinners. So I come walking in, you know, kind of a young guy. I got my blue suit on, you know, my white shirt. I come walking in. I think everybody in the room looked at me and go, who's that guy? You get lost on the way here? And I walk in, and there's Brig, and there's Bobby Mitchell, and all the players from the team. And they were there to give out Thanksgiving dinners to people in Shaw who were struggling. And we did that year after year for 20 years. And the players would get up and talk and be introduced about their playing careers. So I said, Brig, you know, I played football. I did. And I'm going to tell my story. It's kind of a funny story. First time I came out on the field with the team, I ran up to the coach. I said, Coach, what do you want me to play? He said, I want you to play end, guard, and tackle. I said, end, guard, and tackle? He said, yeah, sit on the end of the bench, guard the water bucket, and tackle anybody who comes near it. I told that story every Thanksgiving, and it never got any laughs. It was terrible. But I said, Brig, I'm going to tell it today. So Brig gave back to the community. That's, again, one of the personalities of Brig Owens. And who else was Brig? Well, clearly, he was an extraordinary athlete. And we've heard of his exploits. He was a tremendous high school quarterback. Went on to the University of Cincinnati, and he told me a story once. He wanted to go to USC with Mike Garrett. But back in those days, they weren't going to let him play quarterback. So he went to the University of Cincinnati, where he was an outstanding quarterback, and then went into the NFL, and we all know he was in the Hall of Fame type safety, cornerback, defensive back. But in those days, he didn't get to play the position he wanted to play, which was quarterback. And he told me those stories. And you know what? You can't crush talent. He went on to become an outstanding NFL player. We've heard some of the exploits. I love that one where he told me the story too, John, about, he said, you know what? I scored 2 touchdowns in the game, and I didn't even play offense. So Brig was an outstanding football player, and in a fashion where he made us all proud of what an athlete should be. That somebody not only excelled on the field, but even more so excelled off of the field. Now, I got to know Brig the best in the last 10, 15 years. Brig, myself, Bruce, John, worked with the mayor, John Falchecchio. Carl, worked with the football team, would get together frequently to talk about how to get the new stadium built in the District of Columbia. The team excelled at the RFK Stadium. That's where their glory days were, from the 72 Super Bowl years into the 80s, when we actually won the Super Bowl. And you have to remember, the District of Columbia is a new city in many ways. We only got self-government in 1975, and we were a struggling area. And the one thing that brought us all together was the burgundy and gold. And Brig knew that. And his passion and commitment in the last years was bring the team home. That's what we want to do, is bring the team home to the District of Columbia, to the RFK site. Brig was truly a Renaissance man, a man for all seasons, so they say. And I hope all of you will join with me when we do bring the team home to a new stadium in the District of Columbia, to join with me to make sure there is a statue of Brig Owens outside that stadium that exemplifies the athlete, the man that he truly was. Godspeed, Brig. And I'll catch you on the other side.
Statue. Well, Jason? No. Just try, look, you take advantage of every opportunity you can. I learned that from Brig, okay? See a man of influence and power there, suggestions come out, and you go, why not? I want to make sure that Brig is proud of me. One of the guys that was lucky enough and young enough, but yet, I don't know how he pulled it off, because he stood up and said he played with Brig Owens. This is one of my favorite teammates. You may ask, what's the deal with you and these DBs? My roommate was Jarris White. My friends and the guys that I run with are usually corners. They are put in a situation, a no-win situation. They changed the rules on them. When I got in the game, Blunt was playing corner. And they were grabbing, holding, slugging. They were doing everything in the world. Well, television kind of tweaked a few things. Now they're on an island, and they have the most responsibility that I think of in any sport, but they don't shy away from it. And this guy, and you could tell the guys that played in the 70s with the group, and my favorite era, is because you always learn something from them. They're like guys you go camping with, and they've got a knife that has 6 different blades on it. They know how to fend for themselves. They can make a fire without, I mean, they're very special to me. And one guy that I nicknamed Lobster, because he taught me how to hydrate and how to get your body ready for meetings. You know, you get these freezing rooms. They put you in them to sit for 3 or 4 hours. It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of in my life. But old Murphy would be in this hot tub. We had a small hot tub in the old place. Look, when George Allen did it, it was state of the art. It was #1, unmatched as a facility. Now, by the time we got to it, okay, it is what it is. Old Murph would be in there boiling in this hot tub. And I say, dude, are you insane? He said, man, this is the best way as you age to get your body to get into this thing. I go, okay. I tried it. Then he said, here's furthermore. They had these things called hydrocolor packs. And all you young rich guys looking at me like, what are you talking about? We didn't have the therapist and the masseuse and all the things that you guys have. So you get this deal, almost like a hot water heater, and you put it around you. Murph would do this. By the time you went on around noon, you felt 16 again. So I always credited it to him. I said, you know what? This guy's going to go somewhere. Well, guess where he is? He's the president of the Green Bay Packers. And one of my favorite friends, a true champion, ladies and gentlemen, Mark Murphy.
Thank you, Doc. Good afternoon, everybody. Doc has not once introduced me or met me where he didn't call me Lobster. Now, I have a little different recollection of that story. So, as you get older, you have to stay, it takes a little longer to get loose. So Doc and I were in a hot tub together, 10, 15 minutes. And of course, I'm a little lighter skinned than Doc. I'm red, and I'm boiling red. And Doc looks at me and goes, "You look like a freaking lobster." So, and that name has stuck with me the rest of my life. You know, as others have said, I'm truly honored to be here to pay tribute to Brig, and just so thankful for the Owens family, Patty, and the girls. You know, as I look back on my relationship with Brig, I realized just how fortunate I was to have him as a friend and what a great impact he had on my life. I first met Brig, well, I'll tell a little story. Brig and I kind of had parallel lives. We both, and I'll talk about it, we're involved with the union, we're player reps, lawyers. I went to the dark side, though, when I went to management, but we stayed friends. I will say this, though. The Packers are very different than all other NFL teams. I would say we're player-focused. We want to make sure that we treat our players right. And my wife, Laurie, we don't have an owner. We have 365 owners. We're a shareholder. The Packers are shareholder-owned. But I represent the Packers at the owners' meetings. And my wife calls me a phoner, an F-A-U-X owner. That's an owner without the money. So I first met Brig in the summer of 1977. He was a 12-year veteran with the Redskins, and I was an undrafted rookie out of Colgate. And, you know, I look back on it and I think, you know, how fortunate I was to be with a team and organization like the Redskins, but particularly the group of safeties that we had then. You know, you had Brig, who was, you know, obviously in the Ring of Honor, All-Pro, great player. Kenny Houston, who was a Hall of Famer. Jake Scott, I think might still be one of one or two defensive players who was a Super Bowl MVP. And then Eddie Brown, who was All-Pro returner and just a great player. And you might think, how the hell did my agent ever put me in that position? Well, I didn't have an agent back then. So I'll tell a quick story on George Allen and Bruce. This is how I ended up with the Redskins. I was at Colgate, and I didn't know if I'd be drafted or not. I get a call the first day of the draft, and back then the draft was held over 2 days, 12 rounds. And it's George Allen calling me. And George said, "Mark, we really like you. We want to draft you. You know, we're going to send you." I don't know how we didn't have cell phones, and I don't know how we connected everything. He said, "We'll fly you down, and we're going to draft you, and you know, great. It's a great opportunity for you. We've got all great position for you to come into and help us out." Well, make a long story short, he had no interest in drafting me, but he hid me out. And so the next day, the second day of the draft, there were about 4 or 5 of us. They drove us down to Washington, D.C., and you know how far it is from Dulles Airport out to down to Washington, D.C. We had lunch, and the person he kept going to the phone booth and calling. And as soon as the draft ended, pulled me out to Redskins Park, and George said, "The draft just ended. You weren't drafted, but you know, here's a contract. Why don't you take a minute or two and sign it?" And so, meanwhile, I called back to my apartment, and my wife was like, my girlfriend at the time said, "What the hell? What are you doing?" Well, the Redskins had cut off all communication. They said nobody was here, and and then George turned to, I think it was Tim Timerario, and said, "If Mark doesn't sign that contract, let's get that safety from Oklahoma that we like so much." So I ended up signing with the Redskins, and years, obviously, Bruce and I got to know each other over the years, and I once just said, "Bruce, did your father ever tell you what he did to me on the day of the draft?" And he said, "Quit complaining, it worked out all right." You know, and so summer 1970, Carlisle, Pennsylvania, Dickinson College. You know, there's 5, 6 safeties on the team competing for 4 spots, and it was pretty evident that Brig and I were competing for that last spot. And this is what's really remarkable about Brig. At the end of training camp, the Redskins cut Brig, and I remember Brig coming out to me, and during training camp, he was, as he is always, he's just such a gentleman. And he took me under his wing. And rather than, and I look back on it now, because having been in the game, I know how rare it is, you know, for veterans to, rookies that are competing for your positions. But Brig always had a longer term view in life. And he was so helpful to me. And, you know, the very end of preseason, the cutdowns, Brig was released. And I remember him coming out to me and saying, congratulations, you deserved it. And just he was such a dignified person. He was always that way. Well, the first game of the season, we played up in, it was actually called Giant Stadium then, it wasn't commercial. We lost a game to the Giants. And next day I go into the locker room on Monday and I see Brig there. And I'm thinking, uh-oh, this is not a good sign for me. Well, the good news was I think George Allen realized that we really missed Brig's leadership. And that, so he brought him back, and we kept 5 safeties that year. And it was the best thing that happened in my career, you know, to be able to spend a whole year with Brig, learning the defense and, you know, knowing the game the way he did, and just really owe so much to him and to George. You know, not only was it was great for the team to have his leadership, but as I said, for me. And, you know, Brig and I, you know, established a friendship that would last for 45 years. And you all know, Brig's a connector. He connects people, he stays in touch with people, and it's just, and we've stayed connected over the years. I mentioned before, we're really kind of led parallel lives. One of the other ways we were connected was through John Hauser. You heard from earlier. John and I went to business school together, and he and Brig had a great partnership for 36 years. And I just thought I would share 3 relatively quick stories that to me kind of really show the special kind of person Brig was. You know, when I was working for the NFL Players Association, and again we had you know, both had worked with, both were player reps for the Redskins, both negotiated during strike years, both worked for the Players Association. But I'll never forget, I was working for the Players Association, and Brig, as you know, he had all kinds of business connections. And so this would have been probably like 1985, 1986. Calls me up when we meet, and Brig says, I've got some technology that I'm working through, and I just thought maybe you and I could talk about it. So I didn't really know what he was talking about. Well, Brig came up, and he had this big phone. It was a cell phone. and I was thinking to myself, what the hell is this? Little did we realize that, you know, many years from now, we would be tethered to this. So Brig was ahead of his time, and again, always willing to do special things. The other connection I had, this is when a few years after my time with the Players Association, became the athletic director at Colgate. And Brig called me up, and, you know, as an athletic director, you get calls a lot from different people, and, you know, can you take a look at this kid, that kid? He called me up, and he said, listen, Mark, there's this kid from Fullerton, Brig's hometown, that I think might be a good fit for Colgate. And so had our coaches look at it. Well, come to find out, that young man, R.J. Gregory, not only was a good fit for Colgate, he ended up being one of the best receivers in the history of Colgate, and he was instrumental in Colgate, which I think we had an 0-11 season in his freshman year, completely turned things around, made the NCAA playoffs, and then in 2003, as a non-scholarship football program, getting to the NCAA championship game. R.J. Gregory is here. Where are you, R.J.? Why don't you stand up? Way up in the top. Here's the amazing part of this story. RJ and I were talking this morning. Brig didn't tell him, and he didn't know that Brig had called me, which is so typical, that Brig saw a need, he knew the Gregory family, and he knew he could be helpful because of the connection that he had with me. So, and obviously, Colgate benefited from as well as RJ. Last story I want to talk a little bit about, and it's been mentioned before by Dee and others, you know, the union activity and the relationships that we all had. Ed Garvey, I stay in touch with Ed's family, by the way, a little plug here. Coming out this fall is a book by Ed Garvey that is going to be fascinating, kind of the history of the NFLPA and the NFL. But, yeah, and of course, Gene Upshaw and the great things that he did. So in 1982, again, this is a connection with Brig. Brig was working for the Players Association. I was the Redskins player rep and was on the bargaining committee, actively involved in negotiations. Decided to go on strike 2 games in. We had, as Dee said, a short NFLPA All-Star season, but Brig was really helpful to me during that time. He'd been through the strike as a player in 1974, the player rep, and he talked to me about keeping the team together and continuing to put the focus on pushing for the players' rights. And I think because of Brig, you know, you look at it and it's a tribute to people like Brig and Gene Upshaw and the leadership for the Redskins, and obviously Joe Gibbs, but in the strike years of 82 and 87 were both years that the Redskins won Super Bowls. And I think it's because the teams were able to stay together. Just in closing, I would echo what everybody said. I think we're all better people for having spent time and having had Brig in our lives. He was a football player. He was a great football player, but it didn't define him. And as I said before, I'm forever grateful that I signed with the Redskins as a free agent and was able to establish a lifelong relationship and friendship with Brig Owens. He's as fine a man as you will have ever met. Thank you.
A giver, over and over and over. It's almost every story. It's as if it was staged. I mean, it is amazing, but it's all real, and we've got a good ways to go with it. Luann Bennett is part of that great company that Brig was associated with, and he would talk to me a lot about it. Obviously, the legal part of it was a little bit over my head, but Brig was patient, and he never big shot at you. He never made you feel like you didn't understand what he was talking about. He made sure you did. Luann, can't wait to hear your stories. The microphone is yours.
Good morning. As you just heard, I'm Luann Bennett, Brig's business partner, his colleague, and his friend. Brig came into my life in 1986, the year he and my late husband, Richard Bennett, formed a sports representation business called Bennett Owens. From day one, Brig's dignity, ease, and grace made him an incredible partner to Rick, first in the sports business, and then in real estate development. Throughout their real estate partnership, Brig played a critical role in acquiring and entitling sites for development. His knowledge, his contacts, and his background, coupled with Rick's financial and legal experience, led to a very successful friendship and partnership. In 1994, Rick died of leukemia, and it fell to me to step in as Brig's partner to complete the work that they had begun. Brig was simply one of the greatest gifts of my life. Separated by just an office wall for 28 years, Brig was always, always there for me and for our 3 sons, who had lost their father when they were very young. He stepped into their lives like he stepped into so many others, without reserve, attending football, lacrosse, and hockey games, graduations, and giving much-needed advice. I am forever grateful for Brig's love and support. He was simply, as many have said, the finest man I have ever known. Brig is no longer with us, and we're all feeling an incredible loss, though none more than Patty, Robin, and Tracy. For me, the best way to keep Brig's legacy alive is to embrace his humanity. For we are all better if we adopt a little bit more Brig into each of our lives. Every time I have a difficult decision to make, I will ask myself, what advice would Brig give me? It will undoubtedly take me to a better place, as it has so many times during his life. Second, I, like all of you, will do my best to support Brig's family by being present for Patty, Robin, and Tracy as they navigate the loss of their beloved husband and father. I have lived through the depths of grief that you're now feeling, and no one can fill that void. But I can promise you that being surrounded by friends and family will make an immeasurable difference in the journey you're right now experiencing. In closing, I want to thank you all for being here to honor my business partner and friend. Brig lived an extraordinary life. Each of us has known Brig in our own way, and our lives have been better for his being a part of them. For all that, all I can say is, Brig, thank you for being my friend and my partner. We love you and we miss you.
Just as a footnote to all former players, teammates of Briggs, we'd love to have you at the conclusion come up on the stage to get a group photo. We'd love to have a photo of all the ex-players with the Owens family to give you so that you have just another reminder of today and the relationships from all the guys. I didn't want to forget that. Lucille Hester is our next speaker. I first heard about the Pigskin Club from Brig, got involved with it because of Brig, and just enlightened. I mean, a guy living out in Northern Virginia who's from Southern California, he was the great tour guide. And so once again, we'll do this. Is Lucille Hester, here we go. First lady, wait a minute, where's Bruce? What kind of guy are you, man? Supposed to be your date, you're slipping.
Good afternoon. My name is Lucille Hester, and I have the privilege of thanking all of you who said a little something about a little boy called Bobby Hayes. After, I thank you, Miss Patty, and your family for this wonderful invitation. Appreciate that so much. But, you know, in 1964, and I know you say she can't be that old, I had the privilege of being in Tokyo to see this little boy win 2 gold medals, who happened to be my baby brother. And I told everyone, you know, he would win 10 if he was in 10 events. Then later on, I found out that he had been drafted in the National Football League. So here comes 1965. And everybody who would listen to me, and those who did not listen, I told them NFL will change because they just drafted the greatest player ever. So here I am, 1965. I've been teaching and coaching in Southwest Georgia during the civil unrest. And again, telling everyone, NFL, he's gonna make the team, not even worried about it. And we're gonna get to the Pigskin Club in a minute. But anyway, I get this collect emergency call, 1965. And I'm saying, if they cut my brother, it won't be any playing of any football in this United States. get on the phone, the operator said, you have missed, you big sister, and you got to take this call. I said, I will. She said, it's emergency. He's been calling every 5 minutes. He gets on the phone. He says, sister, I'm just so happy. I have the greatest roommate in the world. He is smart. He is calm. And you know, he's suave. I said, suave? And he's playing football? I said, didn't the old people used to tell us when we were playing in the streets and then, you know, barefooted, that in order for you to play football, you had to be mean and angry? And he said, yes, but I said, well, can he play? He said, oh, I'm sure he can. He's suave. Anyway, he said, I want you to meet him, and I'm going to call you back shortly. Within a couple hours, I get another collect call. And he said, yeah, I have your other brother on the phone. He'll be your other play brother. I said, I want you to meet him. So this young man gets on the phone, very polite. And I'm saying, oh, he is suave. He said, your brother told me that you're going to save the world. I said, I am. He said, but I'm going to help you. The greatest words ever that came true. Because I was fired and he was cut, and we ended up in Washington, D.C. How great that was. Wonderful. So since I knew that I was going to save the world with the children, and he was going to help me, we had the biggest and greatest bond there was. So it was the bad little girl and Mr. Suave. So what you don't know about all the times he had to come when I called for the Jabbo County Youth Football League. We played it with thousands of children at Roosevelt High School. This is back in the 60s. You may not know that we had ran this sports program, a youth sports program that's on college campuses across the country. And Rick had to come, along with Bobby Mitchell, and they had to talk to the children. And I told them in 1969 that I needed to take some children to the Redskin training camp, excuse me, commanders. And so he said, okay. So Vince Vita was there. So when I told him that I needed to bring some children, he said, okay, you bring a couple. I said, maybe 100. And Briggs said, okay. So from that day on, we've been going to the Redskin training camp, commanders. You may not have known that when he got received his law degree, that he came to speak to the children, the young men who needed to know about the juvenile justice system at the University of District of Columbia. You may not have known that with my relationship with Tom Beard and the football officiating clinics, that he came to tell them that if you don't make the team, you could be an official. You know, they kind of control the game, okay? That really made things good. And as we moved on, and there was this pigskin club, okay? I applied in 1969 because I wanted this grandmother to see her grandson, who she had never seen receive an award, and they told me it was men only. Yes, and it was men only because they, you know, played football. But I taught football, and I taught every position. So I figured I knew more football than anyone who was a member. So I had all of our children to do, well, first of all, a couple hundred members. So we selected just random, about 250 members, and we did a little history to see where I would add up and what position I would be in on the list. Well, I came out number 1. Anyway, they did not accept my application at that time, 1969, which was fine. I got them later. And because of that, we have the new president of the Pigskin Club, and he was going to tell you a little something because the honest reason that I had to give up my office because I was former, I think they changed the rules and I couldn't last but 2 terms. I think that's right.
You were president for life.
Yes. Okay. Then William Chesley's going to tell you a little more about the 3. Okay?
So I guess we're still in the morning, or good afternoon, I should say. My name is William Chesley. I'm the current president of the Pigskin Club, and I just became the current president maybe a month ago when our president, A.B. Williamson's wife became seriously ill, and he was dealing with some significant health issues as well and had to step down. But prior to that, in 2002, I followed Brigman Owens as the president of the organization. Brig was the president from 1996 to 2002. And Brig, even back then, he kind of introduced me to succession planning because when I joined the club, he was already cultivating me to serve in some type of leadership role. Little did I know that he was already encouraging me and in subtle ways telling me that he wanted me to be the next president. And sure enough, I did become the next president in 2002. And because of his leadership, and because of his encouragement, I felt very comfortable pulling into that position and really doing well at that time because of Brig and because of Ms. Hester and other real good members of our organization. The thing that I also wanted to say, and certainly wanted to convey this, June 22nd, when I got the word that Brig had passed, I was like one of the other speakers, I think it was Doc, who said, it kind of struck me as, Brig, gone? And that was the way I kind of sensed it. I'm from a big family, 6 brothers, all of us played sports, and in fact, Brig was the player representative for my brother that played with the Eagles for 4 years. So I got to know Brig even before my days in the Pigskin Club, and he also became pretty close to my family, and was also general counsel for my family, I should say, from the standpoint of guidance in terms of where they went to school and things of that nature. But I just wanted to say that on behalf of our organization, we're still shocked, but we also know that he's in a better place, and we're glad for that. But I could say for myself, I'll always cherish Brig, not only for his leadership in the club, but for all of what we've heard here today in terms of his role in the community. That's really what inspires me today. And people like Brig, I watched Bobby Mitchell and people like that back in the day when I was growing up. Ms. Hester talked about 1965, 1966, and she was teaching 1965, 66. I was an 11-year-old undrafted middle school student out of Washington, D.C., and my favorite team was the Washington Redskins. And I had a front row seat seeing people like Brig and Bobby in them because back in those days, they were practicing on some occasions right behind RFK, behind DC General Hospital, right across the street from RFK. So I got to see some of my favorite players back in those days right up by. Another thing before I close out, I want to just point out, someone mentioned about Bobby Mitchell getting tagged by Brig in a football game in Dallas. If Bobby Mitchell was here today, Bobby would have a little different take on that because I heard some of those different takes over time. And in fact, one special take, because they always went back and forth anytime they were together, and somebody mentioned how great a defensive back Brig was, Bobby would say, well, yeah, he was good, but I went against him every day in practice, and he never covered me. So in closing, I'd just like to say on behalf of the members and the officers and members of the Pigskin Club of Washington, our deepest condolences go out to the family. We will certainly have a special tribute in play at our next awards banquet for fall 2022. So we will keep the family advised of our plans in that respect. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. And in reference to the time when Mr. Swab hit Bob in that play, in that game, he called me the next day to apologize. Thank you. Enjoy.
Good job, Bruce. Proud of you, man. Slow but steady. That's good. It's Pigskin Club, man, so many memories, super leaders. And super leaders was an honor to serve and really an honor to be just reminded that it's still something that can be continued. Let's see if we can, at this point, we've got 3 to go. You're hanging in great, too. Love the stamina. He would be proud. We can't wilt. We can't tell him we're tired. You know, there's no quit in us, so don't even think about saying it. We just started opening, giving bathroom permits to allow people to actually go out and take care of that. But Warren Bishkoff, who is the Super Leaders Board of Director and Senior Managing Director at the Rec. Warren? Oh my goodness. So formal. No. We actually came in together. Believe it or not, it's a pretty good guy here. It really is. Some of you look a little bit confused, but I vouch for him.
So they say you learn a lot about somebody at a funeral or a service like this, and I learned a lot today. I learned that Brig played football. And obviously quite well. I've been in the trenches with Brig for the last 22 years, and I used to joke with him, did you really play football? I never saw him play football. I never saw any footage of him playing football. A bunch of my partners and friends are here. Steve Salem, president of the Ripken Foundation. Brig introduced me to the Ripken Foundation, introduced me to Cal and Steve Salem. He introduced me to a lot of people. He had a big influence on my life, but I used to joke with him, did you really play football? Because, you know, now he would show me the ring and he'd give me the finger. And that ring, right? So we would go to high schools around DC with that ring. And he would show these kids that ring, and they would listen to what he had to say. So when he died, you know, it was hard to deal with. But when my phone blew up, as everybody's phone blew up, it was, you know, Washington Redskin legend passes away, and I had, you know, 10 news feeds showing me that, and a lot of people in this room, maybe the younger people that did the super leader stuff, were shocked. They said, "Wait a minute." I thought this guy was a super leader legend, right? I thought this guy was I thought he was more well known for that. And so I'll tell you that for the last 22 years, this guy's, forget that football stuff. This guy has touched 30,000 kids, okay? He shook their hands, right? He shook their hands. I mean, you know, I asked Brig a long time ago, I said, Brig, what's the secret to super leaders? How do you get 98% of these kids to graduate from high school? What's the secret? And I thought he was going to give me a complex answer to a complex question, right? He said, it's really easy. You just care. Just care, and they can graduate if you just care. And so he did something better than anybody else could do, right? He cared about people. If you knew him, you knew he cared about you. Everybody here, had that relationship with him. And these kids did too. So he would, I got a couple of funny stories, but he could care like nobody else could care. And one of the things he taught me was there are no bad kids. There are just bad circumstances. And when he first told me that, I said, bullshit. No, not where I grew up, there were bad kids. And he said, you're missing the point, right? And what he wanted to do with super leaders was get to them early, right? And he did, he got to them early. And we would have retreats for these kids. And most people who would have achieved his success in the rarefied air of the NFL, NFLPA, real estate development, what have you, they'd enjoy that, right? What he wanted to do is he wanted to go back into the neighborhood, and he was extremely happy to go into the super leaders organizations and visit these schools with these really tough kids. And he would tell Frankie and tell the teachers, many of them are here, no, I want the kids that are left behind, right? I don't want the football star. I don't need the Rhodes Scholar. I don't need the kids going to Ivy League schools. I want the kids sleeping on grandma's couch that nobody cares about. That's who we need to talk to. And so he would show up in these classrooms, and auditoriums like this, and with kids. And he'd put two fingers up, and they'd be quiet. And he'd talk about, sometimes if he was really in a giving mood, he'd talk about how he was a 10-year-old kid plowing fields in shorts with no shoes on with a mule named Sir. So don't cry to me. I had to do that. You can do this. And when he would meet with these kids and they'd see that ring, the point he would make with them is, I was you. I sat there yesterday. He'd say, you can be me. You need to decide. And he would do it just like I said it, real soft, not a lot of words. And he could connect with these people in a way. So I was surprised to learn today that he played football because I didn't know that man. The man I knew was much, much greater than that, right? Much greater than that. He shook. I calculated with my son Thomas, how many hands did that guy shake? We started doing math. It may be he shook 1 million hands, okay? I mean, that's amazing. And he did so much good work. We were at a Cal Ripken event at Thanksgiving, which by the way seemed fine. I don't know how that guy didn't smoke, didn't drink, didn't swear, did yoga, didn't eat meat. And when I got the news, I'm like, not him, me. Yes, me, but not him. So we're at a Cal Ripken event. He brought Franco Harris there. Franco, Franco said, sure, I'll come. So we're hanging out at a great apartment in Bethesda, and Franco and Cal are talking with Brig and me. And Brig gets pulled away more than most people, gotta go say hi to somebody. And as he's walking away, Cal says, I love that guy. What a legend. And I'm like, that's how Brig rolled. Legends called him a legend. And that's just the way the guy rolled. So, speaking of hands, one of the things I spent the last 22 years at breakfast, lunches, and dinner, daily grill, events after events. He used to say to me, Patty's going to limit my events, okay? Because I would be out every single night. And so we got to have some family time. And he was serious, he would never say no. But we would talk at the Daily Grill or Cap Grill or something. Sometimes he'd say, the best deal I ever did. And I said, believe me. First of all, we used to try to get stories out of him. It was hard to do. We would get them. But he was so modest. He would only brag about Owen, right? So, the rest of us can remember him. But Owen has opportunity. He can go be Brig Owens. He was like his mini me. He's like living through Owen. No pressure, Owen. No pressure. I never saw the kid play, but I heard all the stats and all that sort of thing. So anyway, he would tell me, and he was a deal maker, and he shook a lot of hands. So he would reminisce, and I rarely said this to him, but he'd say, let me tell you about the best deal I ever did. And I said, I know the story, Brig. I know the story. He said, the one hand that I shook that really mattered was Patty's. Right? He's like, that was the deal. And Patty, the last 8 months, Boy, was he right about that. So, hey, let's give her a round of applause. Great job. This is not what you planned on, my friend, but it's what you got. I'm sorry for that. So I'm going to wrap up here. I want to do two funny things. One is, let's give him one final standing ovation, and two is let's do the super leader vow. So if you can stand up, put your right hand in the sky. No, first we're going to do a standing ovation, just for Brig Owens. One final standing ovation. Yeah. And then we'll just do something a little bit, just a little bit cute. Just a little bit cute. Let's do the super leader vow. You put your right hand up, put your left hand on your heart. You say, repeat after me. I promise to be a super leader for life. I promise to stay safe and help others stay safe. I promise to be the best version of myself. I promise to stay away from drugs and guns. This was good. I promise to graduate from high school. And I promise to be a super leader for life. Congratulations, you are now officially a part of Brig's Army. Give yourself a round of applause.
That was better than a 7-inning stretch. That was imaginative. Hadn't done that pledge in so many years. It's been over 40 years. That was good. Reno Wright, it is time for you to join me here at the microphone and once again get us involved in a collective event. And then I'll ask, don't forget, anybody that played with Brig, please come up on the stage. We'd love to get a collective photo with the players and the family. And Reno now will lead us in prayer.
Yeah, first I'd like to thank all of you for coming out today and just being a special part of all of our lives. Brig, for the last 27 years of my life, weekends, sporting events, you name it, it's just been so very special. And just to hear that laugh, just the loudest laugh. I would be in the basement and you would hear him. So anyway, join some prayer in the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as is in heaven. Give us this day and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. The power and the glory forever and ever. Amen. Thank you all.
Frankie gave me a note. Did you know Brig is in heaven teaching St. Peter how to play golf. Yeah. And that is fitting. That is fitting. And we say celebration of life, yet we all learn something new about someone we thought we knew. And you don't brag when you say how many of these you attend. They say the older you get, the more you do, and it's true. They don't warn you for it. The feeling of honor takes over sadness for me. I'm honored to be associated with this family, and the legacy, the experience, everything. And what I miss can't be filled because I know what he's requiring, what he requires of me to do, to continue where he's at. and to support his family, because that's what he would do and has done for us. And, you know, the honor is what it's all about. And then that ball will be in the air, and it'll be football season. And that's what we need. We need the Commanders to go out and attack people like a vicious animal and go out, and the only way we can celebrate is through winning and in his honor. And all these statues, and all that's great, but this guy here refused to fail. I refuse to fail. And we all have to come together with that in his honor. Stadium or no stadium, statue or no statue. It's about the continuation of a man that gave up family time. When he was with us, he wasn't at home. And you allowed it to happen, you supported him. And he supported Patty. Me and Patty had a little business thing going. We're selling beauty creams and new skin and all this, and he was so excited. Because if you know Patty, when she gets involved in something, she's worse than Brig. I'm telling you, talking about an animal. And I love her passion. I love her commitment. And so we shall carry on. I will bring up now Reverend Brown, and there'll be no jokes for JB, because I know he's waiting on one. I'm not going to do it. And Johnny Holiday, stop it, okay? I'm not going to do it. The Honorable Reverend James Brown.
So I promised Doc that given that we've gone a little while here, I know that the mind can only handle as much as the gluteus maximus can stand. So I'll try to make sure I truncate my remarks. I made a couple notes here, and I just wanted to say that I had promised the Owens family that I would do my best to ensure that the tone and atmosphere would be reverential, that it would be respectful, and indeed Christian. But then all of a sudden, would you expect that the president and CEO of the Green Bay Packers would come up here and hit us with an image of he and Doc Walker in a hot tub together? And then the executive director of the NFL Players Association would come up, and I'm thinking, you know, I know Brig relatively well, but not as much as many as you, to tell me that he hit one of my all-time favorite players, Bob Hayes, who was a friend, across the throat with a forearm. I'm like, Brig? But then again, I really shouldn't be surprised, because even though D. Smith said that Brig brought the fight to the Union, I know that that is inherent in every football player, that they have to have that kind of tenacity. And they don't have to be big like Bruce Smith or Mitchell Johnson in size, because two of the toughest players that I've ever had an opportunity to meet or broadcast about are Gary Clark and Brian Mitchell. And I mean, these, talk about dog in them. Brian Mitchell. Hey, Doc, I didn't realize how tough he was until people were telling me about a training camp where he and Jumpy Gathers, for those of you who know Jumpy, Jumpy's like 6'7", Doc, and about 280. I mean, one nasty guy. As a matter of fact, his part-time job during the summer down in New Orleans was picking up engines at the foundry and tossing them across the yard. And something he did upset B. Mitch. And B. Mitch reminded me of the story. This is before I got saved. I used to listen. I used to listen to the Bishop Richard Pryor. And Richard Pryor told the story about two guys in the ring getting ready to fight. And one guy backed out all of a sudden in his corner, asking, "Why are you backing out? Why do you not want to get in there?" He said, "Look across the room. That fool is beating up on his own self. How's he going to respect me?" That's B. Mitch. But B. Mitch had such respect for Brig Owens that he showed up to this tribute a week early. He got the date wrong, but he was here a week early. But that's Brian Mitchell, who certainly was showing that. Hey, the last thing that I was going to say is, and I don't disagree with whoever made mention about there being a statue. So obviously we're talking in front of Jason and some of the other executives as well, that Brig Owens would deserve a statue if there is to be a monument park for the new stadium for sure. Brig Owens absolutely has to be there. But and it's not just the right thing to say, it's because of the life that he's led and what everyone has already said. But make no mistake about it, his iconic and best friend who has to be statue number one would be Bobby Mitchell, who set the tone for what he went through and how he still maintained his Christian character, because he and Miss Gwen certainly set the tone for that team, and Brig carried it on for sure. And as much as I continue to talk about the Dallas Cowboys, let me be clear. I am, even though I can't say that, Johnny Holiday, on TV, I am a diehard Washington fan. I was born in D.C., and it's still my team. I need to be agnostic on air. I get that. But Washington is my team, to make no mistake about it. But Bobby Mitchell, for all that he said, and Brig for what he carried forth, they certainly have earned that kind of respect from all of us. So I thank you so very much for giving me this opportunity to, at least from a ministerial standpoint, to try to maintain my Christian character, and talking about that as well too. So I'll get ready to close by just saying this, and I actually made a couple notes here. I know it's supposed to be a prayer, but if I can just ad-lib this about Brig Owens, because of what I read in Patty Owens' note about him and who he was. So it's not surprising to see the kind of impact that he has had and will continue to have until time is up for all of us. People say, and I understand what they're saying from a worldly standpoint, but the truth of the matter is, Brig is as alive now as he ever has been and will be. That is his body that rests there, but the spirit and soul are eternal, and he is where we all aim to be. The Bible, if you were to take the time to do an honest intellectual and emotional and mental search of it, there are Bible truths that are unquestioned. So we will see him again, those who have chosen the path that Brig Owens has chosen. And if you will, I'm not an attorney, D, like any of you, but I would certainly, in a very, I guess, casual sense, say, reference Deuteronomy chapter 30 and verse 19. And this is God speaking when he says, yes, Old Testament, but it is true, when he says, I call heaven and earth to record or record this day against you, that I set before you life and death, blessings and cursings. And then he gives us the answer to the test when he says, choose life, that you and your seed may live forever, ever. That is absolute factual, that is truth. It is not even arguable about it, because it is a truth, what we've seen throughout history. So I am so happy to know that Brig chose life in all that he has done, because God, in establishing the covenant, and who better to establish the covenant than he who made heaven and earth. It cracks me up when I listen to some so-called heavyweights, intellectual giants, though, who engage in intellectual gymnastics, talk about when the earth started, how it started, but there's not one scientist that can tell you exactly what happened, like the Word of God, which spells it out absolutely crystal clear. Science doesn't explain God. God explains science, philosophy, geology, and anything else. I love the dialogue that he had with Job back in the Old Testament when they were questioning him, when God asked, where were you when I laid the foundations to the universe? Where were you providing that counsel? I made you. Brig understood that. And God says, in order for you to enter this covenantal relationship with me, and it is a covenant of love. Love cannot be coerced. We need to be given a choice. And that is exactly what Brig understood. He took the choice, which is life eternal. So with respect to him passing, God says in his word crystal clear, it is appointed unto man to die once, and the second is the judgment. And the judgment is whether or not we have chosen to either we have chosen, not him, to either spend eternity in smoking or in non-smoking. That is up to us. To God be the glory. I'll close out with this prayer. Heavenly Father, we come in the precious name of our Lord and our Savior, Jesus Christ. Father, truly thanking you for this awesome celebration that Patty, Robin, Tracy, Owen, and all of the extended family, the in-laws, we thank you for this awesome celebration and this gathering of folks who have came again to underscore the truth that the memory of the just, the righteous one, is blessed. It will be eternal. That certainly speaks volumes about Brigman Owens. We praise you, Father. We glorify you. Let us continue to wrap this family in our arms and love them as their husband, their father, their grandfather loved all of us. In Jesus' precious name we pray, who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit forever and ever. Amen. That was the Catholic version of a truncated prayer as opposed to a Pentecostal or Baptist link. So to God be the glory. Doc, all right.
Awesome. Okay, we can get anybody and everyone that has put that uniform on with Brig Owens, please join us on stage. Please join us on stage. And guess we can do that as we repeat a musical interlude. Now for some, take your time. And for goodness gracious, don't fall down those steps. Jimmy, you know I can't pick you up, so I'm gonna need you to be able to do this on your own. Yeah. Look at Roy. Look at Roy showing off. I knew Sweet Pea, he'd come here and show off. Yeah. If Mosley, is Mo here? Yes, sir.
Check. Briggs' wife, Patty, asked that you hear Saints Go Marching as you make your way to the reception. So those who aren't going to be on the stage for the photo are invited to stand up, take a stretch, and start to make your way to the reception.
Jerry Olson, Pat Fisher, Bubba Tyre. Jerry. come up. All alumni, please come on the stage. Yeah, I told you to take a picture and then take one with the family. Yeah. All alumni, please come to the stage.